Justice Antonin Scalia and Kaiser Soze agree. The greatest trick the devil could ever pull is convincing the world he didn't exist. Fortunately for them, the devil does not seem to be effectively executing this plan. Some 70% of Americans, according to a 2007 Gallup poll, believe in his existence. This personification of evil has implications beyond the supernatural, influencing how we think about what it means for people to be pure evil. And as we prepare to playfully celebrate the wicked and depraved on Halloween night, it's worth pausing to reflect on some of the psychological and behavioral consequences of these beliefs. Evil has been defined as taking pleasure in the intentional inflicting of harm on innocent others, and ever since World War II, social psychologists have been fascinated by the topic. Many of the formative thinkers in the field, Kurt Lewin, Stanley Milgram, Solomon Asch, were inspired by their experiences with, and observations of, what appeared to most people at the time to be the indisputable incarnation of pure evil. But what many saw as a clear demonstration of unredeemable and deep-seated malice, these researchers interpreted as more, in the words of Hannah Arendt, banal. From Milgram's famous studies of obedience to Zimbardo's prison study, psychologists have argued for the roots of evil actions in quite ordinary psychological causes. This grounding of evil in ordinary, as opposed to extraordinary, phenomena have led some to describe the notion of pure evil as a myth, a misguided understanding of human nature deriving both from specific socio-cultural traditions as well as a general tendency to understand others' behavior as a product solely of their essence, their soul, as opposed to a more complicated combination of environmental and individual forces. The issue of whether pure evil exists, however, is separate from what happens to our judgments and our behavior when we believe in its existence. It is this question to which several researchers have recently begun to turn. How can we measure people's belief in pure evil, BPE, and what consequences does such a belief have on our responses to wrongdoers? According to this research, one of the central features of BPE is evil's perceived immutability. Evil people are born evil. They cannot change. Two judgments follow from this perspective. 1. Evil people cannot be rehabilitated, and 2. The eradication of evil requires only the eradication of all the evil people. Following this logic, the researchers tested the hypothesis that there would be a relationship between BPE and the desire to aggress towards and punish wrongdoers. Researchers have found support for this hypothesis across several papers containing multiple studies and employing diverse methodologies. BPE predicts such effects as harsher punishments for crimes, e.g. murder, assault, theft, stronger reported support for the death penalty, and decreased support for criminal rehabilitation. Follow-up studies corroborate these findings, showing that BPE also predicts the degree to which participants perceive the world to be dangerous and vile, the perceived need for preemptive military aggression to solve conflicts, and reported support for torture. Regardless of whether the devil actually exists, belief in the power of human evil seems to have significant and important consequences for how we approach solving problems of real-world wrongdoing. When we see people's antisocial behavior as the product of an enduring and powerful malice, we see few options beyond a comprehensive and immediate assault on the perpetrators. They cannot be helped, and any attempts to do so would be a waste of time and resources. But if we accept the message from decades of social psychological research that at least some instances of violence and malice are not the result of pure evil, that otherwise decent individuals can, under certain circumstances, be compelled to commit horrible acts, even atrocities, then the results of these studies serve as an important cautionary tale. The longer we cling to strong beliefs about the existence of pure evil, the more aggressive and antisocial we become. And we may be aggressing towards individuals who are, in fact, redeemable. Individuals who are not intrinsically and immutably motivated by the desire to intentionally cause harm to others. That may be the greatest trick the devil has ever pulled. Exorcism, the ritualistic expulsion of evil spirits inhabiting body, brain, or place, has been practiced in some form throughout history, and is probably the first primitive type of psychotherapy. Hippocrates, the father of Western medicine, was originally a trained exorcist. Jesus of Nazareth is reputed to have healed individuals suffering from mental and physical symptoms by casting out demons. Now, more than 2 millennia later, the Roman Catholic Church is reported to be secretly educating a new crop of exorcists to meet a rapidly rising demand for exorcisms in Italy, Australia, America, and elsewhere around the globe. Here in the US, where there is evidently an acute shortage of formally trained exorcists, burgeoning numbers of suffering souls, some deeply disillusioned with or wary of what mainstream psychology and psychiatry have to offer today, are desperately turning to exorcism to deal with their debilitating devils and demons. Exorcism can be said to be the prototype of modern psychotherapy. See my prior post. Despite the secular scientific persona of most mental health professionals today, simply scratching the surface of rationality and objectivity reveals a secret exorcist. Like exorcists, psychotherapists speak in the name of a higher being, be it medical science, rationality, or some psychological, metaphysical, or spiritual belief system. They firmly, and in the case of biological psychiatry in particular, literally believe in the physical reality of the pathological problem manifested in the patient's symptoms and suffering, and dispense drugs and/or encouragement while joining with the patient in a sacred, therapeutic alliance against the wicked and debilitating forces bedeviling them. Notwithstanding today's economically driven, superficial, simplistic trend toward brief psychotherapies such as CBT, DBT, see my prior post, and myriad psychopharmacological treatments, sooner or later one inevitably is confronted in clinical practice with strikingly similar phenomena and principles to those adduced by traditional exorcists. Psychotherapy, like exorcism, commonly consists of a prolonged, pitched, demanding, soul-wrenching, sometimes tedious bitter battle royale with the patient's diabolically obdurate emotional demons, at times waged over the course of years or even decades rather than weeks or months, and not necessarily always with consummate success. And there is now growing recognition not only by psychoanalytic practitioners of the very real risks and dangers of psychic infection inherent also in the practice of psychotherapy. This psychic susceptibility is almost universally depicted in these films, starting with The Exorcist and most recently by The Devil Inside. Countertransference is what clinicians technically call this treacherous psychological phenomenon, which can cause the psychotherapist or exorcist to suffer disturbing, subjective symptoms during the treatment process, sometimes even as the patient progresses. Hence the ever-present importance for psychotherapists, like exorcists, to perform their sacred work within a formally ritualized structure, making full use of collegial support, cooperation, and consultation, and to maintain inviolable personal boundaries. Dr. Marcia Linehan's DBT, for instance, structures this support and consultation into the treatment program. Paraphrase Sigmund Freud, no one wrestles with the emotional demons of others all day without themselves being affected. This is an unavoidable occupational hazard of both exorcism and psychotherapy. Of course, the main difference between psychotherapy and exorcism is that modern psychotherapy is typically a secular treatment for figurative, metaphorical demons, mental, emotional, or psychological traumas, memories, or complexes, whereas exorcism takes the existence of demons quite literally. Doing so can have certain advantages in treating patients who believe in the devil, demons, and exorcism, if for no other reason than the extremely impressive power of suggestion. This is also the power behind the so-called placebo effect. Someone in the midst of an acute psychotic episode, for example, is confused, disoriented, and hypersuggestible. They desperately seek some meaning to hang on to. Unless we can seriously offer a more or at least equally satisfying explanation of the patient's disturbing experience, it is, as clinicians well know from working with delusional patients, exceedingly difficult if not impossible to rationally dissuade someone of the fervent conviction that they are victims of demonic possession. Sometimes the best approach can be to go with where they are and use the patient's belief system to the treatment's advantage. Psychiatrist M. Scott Peck, who believed in and sometimes practiced exorcism, drew a distinction, like the Catholic Church, but mistaken in my view, between demonic possession and mental illness. Peck, 1983, correctly pointed out that, unlike individual psychotherapy, exorcism makes more use of power in waging war against the patient's sickness, and is usually conducted by a team of exorcists who attempt to overpower the patient's efforts to resist treatment. If you have enjoyed our wisdom, please hit that subscribe and like button, as well to comment if you wish to learn from lost wisdom.